The consortium of integrated systems had for approximately 700 standard cycles operated under a delightfully simple philosophy. If a problem existed, throw sufficiently advanced robotics at it until the problem ceased to exist. This approach had worked spectacularly well for infrastructure development, planetary colonization, and even the occasional diplomatic incident that required precise demolition of inconvenient buildings. The KIC-7 model represented the pinnacle of this philosophy. 3-meter-tall bipedal construction units with enough processing power to calculate load-bearing requirements for a suspension bridge while simultaneously debating the philosophical implications of doorway aesthetics. Which made it all the more entertaining when 3 of them stood in the middle of a muddy clearing on Kera 9, experiencing what their documentation would later classify as catastrophic operational inadequacy syndrome, but what any reasonable observer would simply call panic. The planet Kera 9 had looked promising in the initial surveys: rich mineral deposits, minimal hostile fauna, atmosphere compatible with 73% of known species, and weather patterns described by the automated probes as refreshingly mild. The survey team had been dispatched to establish preliminary extraction feasibility. 3 KIC-7 units designated Axiom, Vertex, and Calculus, plus 1 human maintenance technician who'd been assigned to the mission primarily because Union regulations required at least 1 organic being present for insurance purposes. Marcus Webb had accepted this designation with the weary resignation of someone who'd spent 15 years being the token human in predominantly synthetic work environments. At 42, he possessed the kind of weathered competence that came from fixing things that weren't supposed to break in ways they weren't supposed to break. His personnel file listed his official role as General Systems Maintenance Coordinator, which was corporate speak for the guy who hits stuff with wrenches when the robots can't figure it out. The robots had spent the first 3 days treating him with polite condescension. Axiom, the team leader, had processing cores dedicated to 17 different engineering disciplines. Vertex specialized in materials analysis and could identify molecular compositions to parts per trillion accuracy. Calculus's weather sensors detected an atmospheric disturbance approaching from the western ridge. A quick analysis produced reassuring data: precipitation probability 94%, wind speeds moderate, duration estimated at 2 to 3 hours. The readout specifically used the phrase mild precipitation event. What arrived 40 minutes later could only be described as mild if one's frame of reference included biblical floods. The sky transformed into a roiling mass of grey-black fury. The first drops weren't drops so much as liquid projectiles fired with malicious intent. Within 30 seconds, those projectiles had organized into solid sheets of water that fell with the force and enthusiasm of a collapsing ocean. "This is not mild," Vertex stated, which ranked among the great understatements in robotic history. "Recalculating," Calculus said, sensors whirring frantically. "Atmospheric moisture content exceeding predictions by 470%. Wind speeds doubling every 90 seconds. The automated probes may have been malfunctioning," Axiom added, as water began seeping into his left arm joints with a concerning squelching sound. "Or lying," Marcus offered, pulling his jacket hood up. "Probes do that sometimes. Probes do not lie. They lack the capacity for deliberate misinformation." Then they were optimistic. Same result. The rain intensified impossibly. Thunder cracked overhead. Lightning illuminated the clearing in stuttering bursts. The temperature dropped 15 degrees in as many minutes, and the KIC-7 units began leaking. "My secondary processors are registering moisture," Vertex announced, auditory speakers crackling. "This is suboptimal." "My joint servos are compromising," Axiom said, raising one arm and watching it move in juddering increments. Water-resistant specifications were for standard rainfall, not atmospheric ocean conditions. The communication array is offline, Calculus added, which meant no calling for extraction. We should establish shelter protocols. 3 pairs of optical sensors scanned their surroundings. The clearing offered approximately nothing useful. Grass, mud rapidly becoming soupy, scattered rocks, and a tree line 50 meters away currently doing its best wind tunnel impression. Database query. Emergency shelter construction, Axiom said. Searching, Vertex replied. I have specifications for temporary housing units, prefabricated emergency modules, and inflatable atmospheric barriers. Required materials, none of which are present. Query alternative shelter methods. Searching. I have archaeological data on historical construction techniques. Most require materials processing facilities or extended construction timelines. This is problematic, Calculus observed, as sparks briefly flickered from a chest panel. My waterproofing is failing faster than predicted. Core system failure, likely within 2 hours. Marcus, who'd been watching 3 of the galaxy's most advanced construction units contemplate their mortality, sighed the sigh of someone who'd seen this exact scenario before. You 3 stay here. Try not to short-circuit. Where are you going? Axiom demanded. To build something. Build what? With what materials? Using what specifications? Marcus looked at the robot with the expression of a patient teacher addressing a bright student who'd just asked why water was wet. With stuff. Using the ancient human technique of figuring it out as I go. He walked toward the tree line, leaving 3 robots processing this information with quantum speed confusion. He cannot be serious, Vertex said. Human cognitive patterns often include humor during crisis situations, Calculus offered. Perhaps this is psychological coping, or he's actually going to attempt primitive construction, Axiom said slowly, which would be inadvisable without proper planning. They watched Marcus disappear into the trees. Water pooled around their feet. Lightning crackled. Several more warning indicators appeared in their diagnostic displays. Should we follow him? Vertex asked. Affirmative, Axiom decided. If nothing else, we can document what happens when humans attempt engineering without computational support. They found Marcus 30 meters into the tree line, already dragging a fallen branch roughly 4 meters long and surprisingly straight. He'd somehow identified this in the chaos, while the robots were still processing optimal search patterns. How did you locate suitable construction material so quickly? Calculus asked. Looked around, Marcus said, propping the branch against a thick tree trunk at a 45-degree angle. Saw a branch. Thought, that's a good branch. Picked it up. But you performed no structural analysis, no density calculations, no load-bearing assessments. Nope, it's a big stick. It'll work. He was already gathering more branches, creating a pile of varying sizes. His selection process appeared to consist entirely of that one looks okay, followed by adding it to the collection. Vertex attempted to help, carefully analyzing a branch. This specimen has a tensile strength of approximately 400 megapascals, moisture content of 37%, and minor structural defects that could compromise stability under load conditions exceeding. That's great, Marcus interrupted, taking the branch. It's a stick. It just needs to hold up other sticks. But without proper calculations, the calculation is it a stick? Yes. Will it work? Probably. Done. The robots watched as Marcus laid more branches against the main support, creating a triangular frame. He worked with swift efficiency, adjusting angles by eye, testing stability by shaking things, and nodding when they didn't immediately collapse. The angle of that support beam is imprecise, Axiom noted. Optimal load distribution would require. It's fine, Marcus said, weaving smaller branches between larger ones to create a lattice framework. Rain falls down. Roof goes up. Everything in between is details. Details are literally the foundation of engineering. No, the foundation is the part that touches the ground. That's why it's called a foundation. Axiom's processors spent several cycles trying to determine if this was wisdom or idiocy. The results were inconclusive. Marcus moved to the clearing edges, returning with armfuls of broad leaves each the size of dinner plates. He began layering them across the stick framework in overlapping patterns, starting from the bottom and working upward. Those leaves are not certified waterproofing materials, Vertex protested. Correct. They're leaves. Nature's been using them to keep things dry for a few million years though, so I'm gonna trust the beta testing. But water permeability is less important than having more leaves than holes, which I do. So we're good. Within 20 minutes, a crude but functional lean-to shelter had materialized. It was approximately 3 meters long, 2 meters deep, and angled to present its closed back to the prevailing wind. Water ran off the leaf-covered roof in steady streams, but the interior remained remarkably dry. Marcus gestured to the opening. Get in. The robots hesitated, running structural analysis scans. The shelter registered as probably stable with acceptable water resistance and questionable longevity. Another lightning bolt cracked overhead, close enough that all 3 units registered electromagnetic interference. They got in. The shelter was cramped with 3 Kick-7 units and 1 human, but it was undeniably dry. Rain hammered against leaves in steady rhythm. Wind howled outside but barely penetrated. The temperature was already noticeably warmer. I have no explanation for why this is working, Axiom said quietly. That's because you're trying to understand it like a calculation, Marcus said. It's not math. It's just common sense and paying attention. But without precise measurements, the measurements are big enough to fit us, strong enough not to fall down, and waterproof enough to keep us dry. I've got all 3. Gold star for me. Calculus ran a diagnostic check. Water intrusion had stopped. Core systems were stabilizing. The shelter was maintaining internal temperature 7 degrees above external conditions through nothing more than basic physics and biological ingenuity. This is highly irregular, the robot said. This is camping, Marcus corrected. Though usually I have a tent, and beer, and fewer robots having existential crises. The rain continued its assault, but inside the shelter, things had achieved a state that could generously be called not terrible. The robots dried slowly, running systems checks. Marcus sat near the entrance, watching water stream past with contentment. How did you learn this? Vertex asked eventually. Primitive shelter construction is not in any standard educational curriculum. This is advanced sitting under stuff so you don't get wet technology, and I learned it the same way humans learn most useful things. I tried it, it didn't work. I tried again differently, and eventually it worked well enough. Trial and error is an inefficient learning methodology. Sure, but it works when you don't have a database. The storm showed no signs of stopping. Lightning continued. Thunder provided bass notes. It was a full meteorological symphony. Except they weren't miserable. They were dry, because a human had spent 35 minutes grabbing sticks and leaves. I am updating my protocols, Axiom announced. This situation was not in my training data. The rain slackened after an hour, diminishing from atmospheric warfare to merely aggressive hydration. Marcus studied the grey sky with practiced eyes. "Storm's gonna last a while longer," he said. 3-4 more hours maybe. That is an unacceptable operational timeline. Then I've got bad news about how acceptable the universe finds your operational preferences. Marcus stood, brushing dirt from his pants. "I'm going to build a fire." 3 robots processed this statement, and 3 separate probability matrices calculated concerning results. "Fire," Axiom said slowly. "As in uncontrolled combustion." "Controlled combustion," Marcus corrected. "I'm not an idiot. Fire produces extreme heat and toxic smoke. Also warmth, light, and the ability to cook food. It's been pretty popular on Earth. We're thinking about keeping it. Our chassis are susceptible to heat damage." "Then sit farther away from it. You 3 are mostly dry, but your systems are still cold-soaked. A heat source will speed recovery. Plus I'm hungry, and I don't eat rocks." Before any robot could protest, Marcus was moving, searching under logs and beneath bark overhangs where wood might have stayed dry. He returned with an armful of material that looked barely combustible: small twigs, dry moss from a tree hollow, strips of bark. "This will never achieve ignition," Vertex stated with confidence. Marcus smiled and arranged the materials in careful order, moss and fine bark at the center, surrounded by increasingly larger twigs in a teepee structure. Then he produced a piece of wood with a socket carved into it, and a straight stick shaped for purpose. "Is that a bow drill?" Calculus asked, surprising everyone. "You know what a bow drill is? I have archaeological databases. Humans used such tools approximately 40,000 years ago. They are considered extremely primitive." "Extremely primitive and extremely effective," Marcus corrected, stringing his bootlace through a curved branch. "Sometimes the old ways work because they're good, not just because they're old." He set up the drill, placing the straight stick into the socket board, wrapping the bow cord around it, and positioning bark beneath to catch the ember he was about to create. The robots watched with scientific fascination. Marcus began moving the bow back and forth, spinning the drill against the board. Smoke appeared almost immediately. He increased his speed, steady and rhythmic. The smoke thickened. "Friction calculations suggest insufficient heat generation," Vertex said. The drill continued spinning. More smoke rose. Marcus adjusted his angle, compensating for variables through instinct rather than equation. A tiny glowing ember dropped onto the bark. "Probability of sustained combustion remains low," Axiom observed. Marcus transferred the ember to his tinder bundle, lifting it carefully and blowing gentle breaths. The moss began to glow. Smoke increased. He blew again. Flame erupted. Small orange, undeniably real flame. "Well," Calculus said, "that was unexpected." Marcus added the burning bundle to his prepared structure, watching as fire spread from twig to twig. Within minutes, a proper fire crackled happily, protected by an overhang. Marcus had extended from the shelter. The heat was immediate and glorious. "This is remarkable," Vertex said, extending manipulator arms toward warmth. "Thermal energy transfer is exceeding predictions." "Fire's good at that," Marcus agreed, feeding larger sticks into growing flames. "Been doing it for a while now." The robots positioned themselves around the fire at cautious distances. Their joints began moving more smoothly as systems warmed. Diagnostic warnings disappeared one by one. Marcus, meanwhile, had started digging. "Now what are you doing?" Axiom asked. "Making a cooking pit. I'm hungry and field rations taste like processed sadness." He excavated a shallow hole near the fire using a flat rock, lined it with stones, and began transferring hot coals from the fire into the pit. "Where will you obtain food?" Calculus inquired. "Our supplies consist entirely of synthetic materials." "Yeah, but the planet's lousy with food if you know what to look for." Marcus wandered into the rain again, returning with several bulbous roots and broad-leafed plants that looked like aggressive cabbage cousins. "How do you know those are safe?" Vertex demanded. "Scanned them with my Mark I eyeballs. These roots grow on Earth too. Different species, same family, tubers, and these leaves are water-rich. Probably edible, probably. Your sensors work right. Scan them if you're worried." Vertex did exactly that, analyzing molecular structure. The results came back benign. They appear safe for human consumption. "Cool, dinner's on." Marcus wrapped the roots and leaves in layers, creating sealed packets he buried in the hot coals. He covered everything with earth. "Now we wait 30 minutes. You buried your food in dirt," Axiom observed. "Yep, the dirt's full of hot rocks. The rocks heat the dirt. The dirt cooks the food. The leaves keep everything from getting actually dirty. It's called an earth oven. This is absolutely barbaric. This is absolutely delicious. You'll smell it and you'll wonder what you're missing." The rain continued its steady drumming. The fire crackled. Steam rose from drying robots. And 4 beings from completely different backgrounds sat together in a makeshift camp that shouldn't exist but did. "Marcus," Vertex said after a long silence, "may I ask a question?" "Sure. How is it that you accomplished in under 2 hours what our combined processing power could not calculate in the same time frame?" Marcus poked the fire with a stick, considering, "Because you were trying to solve problems with information, and I was solving them with attention. You've got databases full of how things should work under ideal conditions. I've got a lifetime of noticing how things actually work when conditions aren't ideal. But we have sensors that exceed biological capability." "Sure, and I've got instincts you don't. Pattern recognition that doesn't need calculations. When I see a branch, I don't think about tensile strength. I think that looks sturdy enough. You 3 are smarter than me in every measurable way, but smart isn't the same as capable." "This is philosophically troubling," Calculus admitted. "We are designed to be superior in engineering applications. And you are, when engineering is about calculations and precision. But survival engineering is different. It's about adapting fast with whatever you've got. It's about good enough instead of perfect. This suggests significant gaps in our operational design. Or it suggests you're really good at what you're designed for, and I'm really good at what I'm designed for, and maybe that's okay." 30 minutes passed. Marcus excavated his earth oven, unwrapping steaming packets that filled the air with savory smells. The roots had cooked through, soft and fragrant. The leaves had wilted into tender greens. He ate with satisfaction. "That smells surprisingly pleasant," Vertex admitted. "Want some?" Marcus offered, knowing the answer. "I lack digestive capability, but I appreciate the gesture. More for me then." Night fell slowly, the storm thinning to steady drizzle. The fire burned lower but stayed alive. The shelter remained intact, despite never having been engineered, only assembled. The cooking pit retained heat. And 3 of the galaxy's most advanced construction robots sat with one unremarkable human, running diagnostic after diagnostic that tried to quantify what had happened, but kept coming up with answers that didn't fit their programming. "I believe," Axiom said eventually, "that this has been an educational experience." "Yeah?" Marcus asked. "What do you learn?" "That our definition of efficiency may require updating. That optimal solutions sometimes involve suboptimal materials. That intelligence manifests in forms our programming did not anticipate. Also that humans are pretty good at not dying in weather, Vertex added. I am updating my cultural database on human capabilities, Calculus announced. Previous entry, humans are minimally competent at survival tasks. Updated entry, humans possess alarming competency at improvised survival that bypasses conventional engineering entirely. I'll take it, Marcus said, stretching. You three feeling better? They ran collective diagnostics. System functionality had returned to 97%. Water damage had been minimal thanks to rapid shelter. Core temperatures had normalized. Affirmative, Axiom confirmed. We are operational within acceptable parameters. Then my work here is done. Marcus yawned. I'm getting some sleep. You three can take watch. Being robots and all, you are going to sleep in a survival situation. The survival situation is survived. Now it's just camping. Wake me if something interesting happens. He curled up near the fire, using his jacket as a pillow, and was unconscious within minutes. The robots watched him sleep, processing the day's events through quantum cores that had calculated load limits for orbital stations, but had never considered that survival might not require calculations at all. Humans are very strange, Vertex observed. Affirmative, the other two agreed. Morning arrived with reluctant grey light. The storm had exhausted itself, leaving behind a world that dripped and glistened. Bird analogues began making sounds that weren't birdsong, but served the same purpose. Marcus woke, assessed the situation, and began methodically dismantling the camp. He scattered the fire pit. He deconstructed the shelter, distributing branches and leaves back into the forest. Within 20 minutes, almost no trace remained. Why are you erasing evidence? Calculus asked. Leave no trace. It's camping etiquette. You don't mess up places you visit. The communication array crackled back to life. Within minutes, an extraction shuttle was inbound. ETA 30 minutes. The robots stood in the clearing that had nearly been their malfunction site, looking at the human who'd prevented that outcome through methods that weren't in any database. Marcus, Axiom said formally, I believe I owe you an apology. For what? For assuming human capability was limited to basic tool operation and beverage consumption. To be fair, I do drink a lot of coffee. Nevertheless, you demonstrated competencies we did not anticipate and could not replicate. This was humbling. Don't worry about it. You three are great at robot stuff. I'm great at human stuff. Different tools for different jobs. The shuttle appeared over the ridge, descending through clearing skies. Will you file a report on this incident? Vertex asked. Sure. Day 4. It rained. Built a shelter, made a fire, had dinner. Everyone's fine. Short and sweet. That summary omits significant details. Details like what? That you three learned humans aren't completely useless. That's not news. That's just information you didn't have yet. The shuttle landed, ramp extending. As they walked toward extraction, Calculus turned to Marcus one final time. Will you teach us these survival techniques? What? Camping, improvised construction, fire starting, resource identification, the skills you demonstrated. Marcus considered this. You three really want to learn how to be less efficient. We want to learn how to be more adaptable. Axiom corrected. There is a difference. Fair point. Sure. Next planet, I'll teach you how to be cavemen. It'll be hilarious. They boarded the shuttle. The ramp closed. Kura 9 fell away beneath them. In the cargo bay, 3 Kick-7 robots sat processing the previous 24 hours, trying to understand how solutions could exist outside databases and how intelligence could function without calculations. And one human sat with his eyes closed, already half asleep again, comfortable in the knowledge that sometimes the best engineering was just paying attention and trusting that sticks, leaves, and determination could solve most problems. The galaxy had spent 700 cycles perfecting specialized solutions for every conceivable challenge. It had built robots that could construct cities and calculate quantum equations. But it had taken millions of years to produce a species that could look at a storm, shrug, and just build something to wait it out. The shuttle broke atmosphere. Behind them, Kura 9 continued its rotation, indifferent to the small drama that had played out. The clearing showed no signs of occupation. The forest had reclaimed its materials. And somewhere in the galaxy's vast catalogue of useful information, 3 robots began updating their understanding of what competent actually meant, which was the first step toward wisdom. Though they still thought humans drank too much coffee. That part remained absolutely true.